Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Welcome to my show. You know that the unemployment rate is near 50-year lows, and that means that millennials are job hopping like crazy. They will look at their watch and say, I've been here for 9 months, it's time for me to leave. So that puts a burden on the boss to be a cool boss to keep the millennials and the Gen Zs in place. And talking about that today, David Carey, he's a learning and development expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah, well, my generation, the boomer boss, we're kind of like a my way or the highway generation, but that doesn't play well with millennials and Gen Zs, does it?
Well, it doesn't, Jeff. And the truth is, it actually doesn't play well even with other generations. Right now, we're seeing significant numbers of high employee disengagement. You can see that in a lot of different news articles that have come out. The Society for Human Resource Management came out recently and said that over half the employees working in the United States today are feeling burned out. And I think that is contributing to a lot of this turnover that we're seeing, not just in the younger generations, but it's also impacting older generations as well. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and said that about 4 years is the average tenure from about 2016 until 2018. They've got a new report coming out hopefully very soon. And the expectation is that's probably not going to improve. And really, if you have somebody working for you, that's the median, I should say.
Yes.
So half the population is a little bit longer, half the population is even less. And as you said, it gets even more dramatic when you go below 30 years old. We see that at about 2.5 years. And this is expensive for companies.
Yes.
It takes nearly 2 months to source somebody to replace that person. And then different statistics indicate that you may be spending half of a salary to find that person and then get them to a place where they can be productive, which could be 3 to 6 months from the time they enter your organization.
Well, if there ever was a bad boss, she was featured in The Devil Wears Prada. We're gonna roll a little video of a trailer of The Devil Wears Prada, and everybody's familiar with that movie and what she brought to that role. She represents really the antithesis of what you're looking for, right? I mean, she was very arrogant, very dismissive of her team, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's certainly one component. I think the other one, Jeff, and I think this is, so somebody like that, you might actually have to do quite a bit of digging to help an individual such as that to really come around to be a really effective boss. But I think that in general, the challenge is not somebody who is extremely arrogant, perhaps anti-people, so to speak.
Right.
It's really more that they just don't know what to do. And I think that's the bigger issue, and that's why we see this so widespread across organizations. It's most of these managers, in fact, in that same SHRM report, they talked about that 90% of managers want to be better at coaching. They just don't know how.
Yes. And a lot of bosses think that, hey, I'm going to put in a pool table or a ping pong table, and that's workplace culture. But
sure.
That's not, they're not looking for a new game room, right?
That's right. But you are correct when you speak about the environment as having a significant impact on the ability for employees to be engaged. If the environment isn't right, and I think one of the key components of that is going to be trust. Can I trust my supervisor? Can I trust my colleagues? What's expected of us? Is it clear? And if that's not there, if there's not a high level of trust, if there's not a high level of feeling that my manager knows me and values me, then it's going to be difficult to have that high level of engagement.
Well, tell us your background. How did you get into business coaching?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think probably the story that I think was the most pivotal for me was early in my career. I joined a company, and after sort of a 90-minute new employee orientation, which was really more about, here are 3 insurance plans, and you should probably pick one, and I can't tell you which one. I left the HR area and had my first meeting with my boss, and he said, David, he said, there are 2 things that I think will be really important for you as far as your success here. And he said, number 1, if you don't see me, that's a good thing. And if you do see me, that's a bad thing. And so whatever our priorities were, our team's first priority was keep the boss in his office.
Yes.
However we have to do that. And I think what really changed for me is we didn't have much information about who he was as a person. He didn't know a lot about us. But I worked for him for 2 years. And by the time I left, we actually got along very well. And I thought later, how much better could he have been as a manager if he had understood the importance of spending some time with us to get to know us and allowing us to get to know him, and how to best work collectively and collaboratively with him. And that's really what coaching is about. And the kind of coaching we're talking about here, Jeff, is not it's not the kind of coaching that a qualified coach would do to say, help you figure out what your professional direction, what you want to do in the next 5 years. How do you do that? How do you build out the process? What's in your background that's going to contribute to that? Yes. It's really more, and honestly, I think you demonstrated this very well just a few moments ago. We were down in your news studio, and on the way up here, and you had I would say it was probably a 30-second conversation with one of your team members. And you started out by giving her some appreciation for something that she had done, which that's always a good thing. And it was clearly very sincere. You were very specific, but it was concise. And then she asked you a couple of questions about something she was working on. You gave her some feedback, and that was it. And the thing that hit me about that conversation was that conversation didn't actually take place in those few seconds. That conversation was the result of many conversations. And my guess would be is that you know her very well, and that she knows you well, and that she trusts you. And that was clear in that conversation.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And so she didn't walk away from that thinking, I wonder what Jeff really wants from me.
Well, one of my employees just paid us the highest compliment ever. She was on vacation for 10 days in Europe, and she came back and she said, I couldn't wait to get back. I missed you guys. I missed the work family. And so I've always said that I've tried to make this a thank God it's Monday company instead of a thank God it's Friday company. And it's not easy, but I'm sure you've gone into sick companies before and started working to identify the issues and help turn things around. How difficult is it when you first come into a company to assess what's wrong?
Well, actually, it depends, and I would say there are going to be some obvious signs of discontent within the organization, and I think one of those signs is if you are talking to an employee and all they really want to tell you is everything is fine, and they're just trying to get away as quickly as possible, and that's a pretty clear sign that they don't feel comfortable being able to be truthful. Yes. And to be authentic in what they're saying. And I had a colleague years ago that said that you can find out a lot about a company by going into the break room. See what's on the bulletin board.
Yes.
What kind of activities are up there? Or do they have a bulletin board? And if they don't have a bulletin board, that may be an indication that there's not a lot of casual interaction going on with the employees.
You know what we have in our break room, and I stole this idea from Fox 4 when I was an employee there. Right next to the news director's office was a blank board, and it was called a Attaboy board. And you'd go up there and you'd write, Joe did a great job on this live shot or something like that. But I remember photographers saying, hey, Jeff, would you put something on the Attaboy board for me? And it got to be a thing. So we put one in our break room, and there's just compliments in there from different employees recognizing somebody who went above and beyond.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think that's a tremendous exercise. In fact, we talked about the appreciation that you showed for your team member today, and that's an opportunity that is often missed. I remember years ago, I was working with a company, and one of the managers had really stepped out, and she had taken a brave step and said, "Here's what I see, and here's what I what I'm worried about.
Yes.
And when you have that moment, it's kind of a pivotal moment when people will say, you know what, I'm just going to risk it. I don't know if I can stay here. So
Yes.
if this doesn't work, I guess I'm out anyway. So I'll just do it. And I wrote her a thank you note.
Yes.
And I write a lot of people thank you notes. She pinned it up in her cubicle, and I noticed a few months later that was the only piece of appreciation she had.
Wow.
And I thought, that's kind of sad that I can walk by and identify, oh, that's my thank you note. And how do I know that? Because it's the only one she has, and it came from the stack of thank you notes that I wrote.
Wow.
And so that's the sort of thing that, you know when somebody doesn't get a lot of appreciation when they hang on to whatever appreciation they get.
Yes. We're going to put up your LinkedIn page so people can get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
David Carey, learning and development expert, and you can connect on LinkedIn. There's his profile right there. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely, Jeff. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, you were wonderful.
Thank you.
You bet. That's it for now.
Cool.
We'll see you next time.